we ready?
Yeah.
Episode 3,
Let's go.
Coffee Talk. Welcome to Coffee Talk. I'm Tim. Thanks for joining us. If you don't know, Coffee Talk is a place, a safe space, where we intend to facilitate meaningful conversations about life, about faith. And the goal is to challenge you, to encourage you, and to inspire you. Now, we know we've all faced our fair share of struggles lately. Surrounded by so much uncertainty, so much unrest, let's be honest, our lives have been turned upside down. And if you're like me, it's been challenging to process the highs and the lows lately. And maybe your brain has been overcome with unanswered questions, or maybe it's even forced you to reevaluate your own outlook on life. I don't know about you, but all of this chaos has sort of caused me to appreciate the simpler things in life, like a good cup of coffee and meaningful conversations with trusted friends. But I'm happy because things are looking up, and that's why we're here. Well, I'm glad you're joining us today because our discussion will center around something I think we can all relate to: the highs and lows of surviving a pandemic. Now, we'll hit that topic in a few moments. So settle in, grab your cup of joe, and join in on the conversation. But before we dig deeper, let's start off with a segment we're calling Take 3. Take 1. Now, some of you might be asking, where'd you get the name Coffee Talk from? Well, I was reminded the other day of those old reoccurring Saturday Night Live sketches starring Mike Myers, titled Coffee Talk, from the early 90s. Maybe you remember it. If not, you can Google it. I think you'll thank me later, or maybe you won't. Who knows if the humor holds up or not. But there was this segment in which Myers, in character as host Linda Richman, would get overcome with emotion. So he would say, "I'm a little verklempt." And then she would say, "Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic." Usually those topics were random things that weren't actually what they appeared to be. Things like, Dr. Pepper is neither a doctor nor a pepper, or Rhode Island is neither a road or an island, or grape nuts contain neither grape nor nuts. Or my own personal favorite, the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Discuss. Thanks, Linda. Let's move on. Take 2. San Diego man reunited with wallet that he lost in Antarctica 53 years ago. Did you hear about this? It's a true story. In October of 1967, a Navy meteorologist named Paul Grisham was shipped out to Antarctica, where he worked as a weather forecaster for a science station. Now, 13 months later, he was shipped back home to sunny California. But his wallet remained behind in Antarctica. Well, recently, the now 91-year-old Grisham was reunited with that lost billfold. What do you think was inside his wallet? Driver's license. He had some poker winnings. There was also a pocket reference which had instructions for what to do in the event of an atomic bomb or a biological or chemical weapons attack. Eek! So what's the strangest thing you've ever lost or found? Go ahead and shout at the screen right now. And speaking of things that have been found, we once found a living squirrel in our wall of our bathroom. We're moving on to Take 3. Last but not least, we have cow news. Cow news!
Moo.
A cow emerged from the sea. You see in this video here? I don't know if this is a biblical sign of the apocalypse or not, but it is a little bit weird. And speaking of cows, enjoy this. That's all I got. That's Take 3, folks. Let's move on. Now, we all know we've all missed out on something, or a lot of things, over this past year. And can you believe it? It's been a year since this pandemic started. And at some point, I think we've probably all wondered, maybe we've even feared that we'd never get back to any sort of normalcy. Let's pause for a moment and reflect. Remember ordering groceries for curbside pickup and then rushing home and disinfecting those groceries? Remember the new hobbies you attempted to learn and then gave up on them 2 weeks later? Remember puzzles and board games and binge watching Netflix? And what about the great toilet paper shortage, or going to school in your PJs, or working from home in your sweatpants, or going to church in your living room? It's been a crazy year. And we thought it'd be appropriate today to reflect upon this past year, to celebrate the highs and to grieve the lows, and to mourn the things we missed, but to also give thanks for the things that we learned. And there's no denying it, our lives have been changed forever. But if you're watching this, you've persevered. And that's what we want to talk about today. And in a few moments, I'll be having a conversation with a few of my close friends. One's a teenager, one's a young adult, and there's a couple that are empty nesters. And we'll be discussing with them the struggles of how each of them dealt with the uneasiness of this pandemic and how human connection carried them through. But first, let's hear what you have to say. What were some of the highs and lows of surviving this pandemic? Let's take a look. We can all relate, no matter our age, that we've certainly have missed out on a lot of things over this past year. I just want to open up by just inviting you guys to share, whether it be in general terms or specific, what did we miss out on, and how has it affected us in unique and weird ways?
I think the biggest thing that I have missed out on is my nieces and nephew. I miss little hugs and laughter and playing silly games and just stuff that you cannot totally recreate virtually.
I think at first what we missed out on, I missed out, let's see, last year I had a junior banquet that was supposed to happen. That got canceled. We were supposed to go to Philly and New York for a band trip. That didn't happen. We were going to play in the Philadelphia Thanksgiving parade, and that we didn't get to do that. And from a family standpoint, like holidays and stuff, not getting to see some family and stuff.
It's been different. There are not a lot of things that, in a sense, that we really missed out on other than the family things. We have a daughter that's lived overseas since February of 2011. She married a Canadian. They've lived in Shanghai, China for the last 3 years. And the plan was to come home last summer, July 1st. But as we know, COVID shut down borders. And last week was our granddaughter's first birthday. We have never seen her other than FaceTime or the videos that she sends. And somebody watches the videos over and over and over. So we've never seen her. We've never touched her. We've never held her. Beginning of COVID, nobody knew. So everybody was very, very afraid. We had tickets for Hamilton. We bought the season package. We were going to do that.
At least from the beginning of things, whenever it was the shutdown and it was still like pretty new and everything. And we all had those couple weeks where everything was still being figured out. I think a lot of people spent a lot of time on Netflix and just watching stuff on TV.
We didn't think much of it when we got our new phones and got a year subscription to Apple TV, but Ted Lasso has changed all of that. We watched WandaVision, The Mandalorian.
And COVID made that really easy because it gave everyone a lot of free time, especially at the beginning of it.
But can you guys think of any other ways in which maybe you've had to adapt over this past year that maybe has helped you even learn and grow in weird ways?
I think I have learned how to make my time with people count. At the beginning, there were all these, Zoom happy hours and game nights and all that, and people got kind of drained of that. But what I also noticed has gone is like the idle, like chit chat and stuff. When you are face to face with someone, even if it's over Zoom like this, it's meaningful conversation. And I know that I've adapted to that mostly because you realize what's important through all of this, which is the people in your life.
I was taking guitar lessons face to face, and they've been by FaceTime now for over a year. There are things in this house that needed to be done for a long time that didn't get done. And so with COVID, somebody said, we should paint the dining room. So bam, we painted the dining room, and then we added this and we added that.
I mean, it's definitely given me more time to be creative, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I've picked up a couple of things. I've been a little bit more artistic. As for like school and stuff, it's definitely changed the way I've done like assignments and stuff too. It did definitely change how I do things and kind of the time frame I set for myself to do certain things.
The biggest struggle that I notice among millennials during the pandemic is mental health. My generation is all about a work-life balance, and there's no such thing as that. I've seen if folks were lucky enough to maintain employment throughout the pandemic, it's not that you're working from home, it's that you're living at work. Most of my friends are raising tiny humans at the same time. People are lonely. People, I think, have higher amounts of, anxiety and depression, seasonal affective disorder. I don't think that's age specific, but I'm just speaking about it from, for my generation.
I mean, first off, just adjusting to everything. We all thought we were just getting a couple extra weeks of spring break. Obviously, that didn't turn out to be.
What about relationships, like teen relationships? How has that become different as a result of all this?
I mean, it's definitely been rough not seeing people face to face and not getting as much time to hang out with friends. At the same time, it also is kind of a blessing because I think during COVID, everyone kind of realized, oh, I should probably talk to this person I haven't talked to in a while and see how they're holding up.
For us, the biggest hit was losing the personal contact with our friends. Retired people go to a lot of breakfasts and a lot of lunches, and not to be able to do that was the biggest hit I think we've taken during the pandemic. To me, the pandemic, I think, was kind of a blessing that God made me stop and say, okay, what's really important to you? And if that was really important to you, it'll be back, be patient, and realize some things didn't matter that much. I had cancer in 2014 and went through chemo and radiation. And my perspective on life definitely was changed by that. And so this pandemic to me is not quite as dark as it is for some people. I'm thankful for every morning I wake up, and if I have to just sit in my chair, then that's okay by me, but I'm awake. And I guess I'll run by what my dad told me a while ago. Don't look at what you don't have, look at what you do have, and be thankful.
Obviously, a lot of people have dealt with a lot of highs and lows over the past year. It's hard to believe it's been a year. And people have probably dealt with a lot of loss.
There's been families who haven't been able to celebrate baptisms, publicly in person, weddings, wedding receptions. People haven't been able to celebrate those kind of things. Student graduations, graduation parties.
Right.
Trips. People have had to cancel trips and vacations that they had planned for years, family trips. The college experiences that a lot of, incoming freshmen didn't get to experience. Right. Obviously, school activities, in-person extracurricular activities. But yeah, there's been loss of those, things on a lot of different levels. So there's a lot of grief that
Right.
are, on a lot of different levels.
Well, people are telling me that they miss the practical little things like being able to hug people. So there are little things that we take for granted that are not there, and they accumulate. People are telling me they want to get out and they want to hug, they want to sing, they want to express.
Don, you sort of alluded to things that I would kind of label in the rites of passage sort of department. How would you express sort of care and concern for someone who has really struggled with missing out on these rites of passages?
There's certainly different levels of grief, and I think grief is very closely related to love, and it's almost as if the deeper you love something, the deeper you grieve. So that can be a person, that can be,
Right.
a thing, an activity. And so, in a lot of ways, grief is I think it's love refusing to let go, and two, I think grief is sort of the stretching of a physical relationship or a personal relationship to sort of figure out how to love somebody in their absence. So, and I think that, that applies whether it's a person or a thing that you've missed out on. So
Sure.
when you deal with disappointment, I mean, Dale and I would be remiss if we didn't say that prayer is obviously a big part of that. I think, knowing that grief, frustration, disappointment, all those things are natural responses, when we miss out and lose things.
Right.
But it takes time, to move past. Eventually, I think you have to make a conscious decision to move past whatever the disappointment is.
Have any of you watched, there's a new Disney Plus series for those that are into the Marvel movies and whatnot, WandaVision. There was a quote that said, "What is grief but love persevering?"
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with that. It's the connection between grief and love. Obviously, we don't often think about that when we're in the moment. How do you help someone put words to these unknown emotions? Or is that something that is necessary?
Well, I think that there's things that we can do. And I fall back on an old saying that comes from someone I respect. His name was Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. And he used to say to people, lose yourself in something in which you have profound conviction. And when we are deeply grieving, we begin to fall back on our faith. Well, people are yearning for a relationship. One thing to do in a time of deep distress is to reach out to others. And a telephone call or sit down and write a note. If you're feeling discouraged, alone, distressed, and if you give yourself away, you'll find that you feel lifted up yourself. Right. By thinking about somebody else.
Well, thanks Don and Dale, and also thanks to Tom, Debbie, Kelsey, and Micah for sharing your wisdom and your experience on this difficult topic. And I thank all of you who chimed in via our social media to answer that question. We heard some important comments related to the challenges that our guests faced, those missed opportunities and the disruption in their lives, family separation, the stress and the anxiety. I think those are things that many of us can relate to. But we also learned some lessons on how they got by and how they survived it all, whether it be through binge watching TV shows, watching movies, playing board games, taking long walks. We've all had to do whatever it took to manage. Now let's switch gears for a moment. I want you to think about all the Zoom calls that you've had to experience over the last year. You ever have one of those Zoom calls that lasted way too long, and after it was done, you realized that could have been an email, or even better yet, a text message? That's the way it goes. We're going to make the best of it here on Coffee Talk. So I want you to enjoy this brief conversation that I've had with some students on Zoom as they discuss how they managed to overcome it. Take a look.
It's been a year since the whole pandemic started and everything changed. Can you think of any highlights or lowlights from the past year? Was there anything that stands out or anything that you can remember about what it was like when everything shut down?
I don't know Like, I feel like I was lucky and I got I got to play summer ball.
Yeah, softball.
And I've been lucky that I've been in person for school all this time, and we haven't had to go online, unless you count that extra week of Christmas break they gave us to just do homework.
A highlight is probably like, I don't know, I feel like I really appreciated like my friends and stuff more.
How so?
Because I mean, obviously we couldn't see other people, so it was like I realized you had taken things for granted all this time.
I guess like having to play like Xbox and stuff with like friends.
What was something that was like didn't go as expected?
Low was like just how the ending of last year kind of went, like the school year, because like I haven't seen anyone in a year.
Mine was probably like I got quarantined I got quarantined like 2 times from sports over the past month. So that's probably hard because I have to just stay inside all day basically, and like not be able to like go see friends or hang out or do sports, because sports is usually the one thing that I get out of the house to do basically, if that makes sense.
Missing out on like sports seasons and obviously missing school and not being able to see people. It was hard to like miss a season, especially being a freshman, to come in as a beginner.
Do you remember any weird things about the early parts of the pandemic? What did you do in your house that was different? How did you spend your time initially?
We went for a lot of walks.
Rewatching TV.
Like binge watching?
Yeah, and like rewatching old shows.
Did you ever feel like you were like missing out on things because of the pandemic and it just made you like sad or upset?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a fear of missing out necessarily, because I know like everyone else was missing out on it at the same time, so it wasn't like other people were getting to do it, but it also like sucked having to miss out on everything.
One time my friends always kept asking me to go inside their house and I couldn't, so that was, and they'd have other friends over, and I think it just felt like replacement kinda, because their other friends were allowed to do something you couldn't.
And why
So
couldn't?
it felt like replacement because of COVID and stuff.
Couldn't really do anything. It's like I feel like I'm not really missing out on that much stuff.
Yeah.
Other than hanging out with friends and everything.
You know how sometimes they say time flies? Does it seem like it's flown by, or does it seem like it's been like 2 years?
2020 felt like a decade itself. Because I can barely remember the beginning of 2020 on the worry of the Australia fires. I can barely remember my 6th grade year because that's how long 2020 was.
I feel like this year has been like slow at times and fast at times.
We were all like anxious seeing what we were gonna do.
And I remember like the first week, it wasn't like a big deal kind of thing, because we really didn't shut down. It was just like school was shut down.
Right.
I remember going to the store without a mask on.
I can barely remember that.
So,
History textbooks are going to be very interesting in year 3000.
Yeah, well.
They're going to need like 10 chapters just for 2020, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Well, thanks for tuning into this episode of Coffee Talk. Whether you're viewing this at home or on your break at work, with friends or in a small group, we hope it's inspired you to face another day with joy in your heart. And I'm going to remind you of every episode that I'm just taking things one day at a time, and so can you. And in fact, if there's one important takeaway from this discussion, it's this: it's that you are not alone. Now, we want to give you 2 challenges for each week. And for this episode of Coffee Talk, your challenge is this: I invite you to reflect upon the highs and lows of surviving this pandemic as a means of becoming more aware of the circumstances in your life, whether they be good or bad, so that you might realize that you're not alone and that God was with you through it all. So jot down 1 high and 1 low, and then meditate on how you grew from those experiences. And secondly, we're going to encourage you to prioritize your relationships. How are you going to do that? Well, there are a lot of things you could do. I encourage you to be creative, but one is you could just reach out to someone that you've lost contact with over the past year. For some, that could be a family member. This pandemic has caused some unrest in our country, and it has ripped apart many relationships. So take the first step. Reach out to that loved one and rekindle that relationship, because we all need love right now. I also invite you to connect with us on social media and on the web. You can check out our Instagram and our webpage. And also check the link in the description for show notes and a talk sheet that you can use personally with your family or in your own small group. Remember, no matter what, be kind to one another. Take care. Peace.
Good job.